I made some improvements to the current reconstruction of the phonology of the Tangut language since already a decade, right? So before I progress further, right, I think it would be a good idea to tie up some of the loose ends and create something that a regular Tangutologist could use, right? So this is the GX 2024-11, and so please choose your language and take a look at this and send your rants to me. I should make an introduction for Tangut. It's a language spoken in mainly during the Tangut Empire, right? So for East Asians, Songchao, and for Europeans, right, around the Norman conquest. There's no direct nor close modern descendant, but it's actually rather close to like West Garonic languages spoken in northeastern Tibet, which is southwestern China. So it's in that part where the languages, right, but not the descendants, like the kinsfolks of the Tanguts is spoken. As Rashiduddin says, the Tanguts are people who live in cities and villages, right, but they are very good at fighting, right, because in general, nomads are good at fighting and not like city people, right? So and they have fought a lot with the Aruk, with the family of Genghis Khan, and the Tangut writing system is the most complicated system ever invented by a human mind, right? Just squiggles, squiggles, and squiggles. And the Tangut phonology is basically I made a lot of improvements, as I just said, about the Tangut phonology, right? This whole thing is WIP, and I still have like 2 or 3 major hypotheses, right? Like which will revolutionize Sino-Tibetan linguistic and stuff, right? Which will be published. But before all that, right, I think it's a good idea, like to just create something that regular Tangutologists can use, and which is like maybe a little bit old, right? But it's like internally consistent and explain a lot of things. My 2 main hypotheses is the utilization hypothesis, right, which removes, if you know the usual way Tangut is written in the Latin alphabet, right? It's like bia, mia, 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 right? There's the yod, which is like very annoying, right? So I removed this yod by the utilization hypothesis. And also I proved that what Gong Huangcheng, which is like the standard guy for Tangut phonology, right, reconstructed as long vowels, right? I proved that they are actually nasal pre-initials, and that explains a lot of things. Right, so these are just the QR codes, the arwema that you probably are already browsing on your phone, hopefully. Right, so as Bill Baxter told me, right, on Monday, right, this is a Tangut with a human face and with a very good reason, which is that if you want to like work, especially if you want to work on like, you know, it's even more important for non-linguists than for linguists, right? Because as linguists, we are all very like agile, right? We're all very adept at like juggling very weird transcription systems, right? But not normal people, right? So for normal people, the thing is like life-changing, right? So for example, you have this. I had this like last year, right, on Hannes great thing about like the Tarim Basin, right? So so some guy worked on the Tangut version of a Dharani Sutra in Sanskrit, in Pseudo-Sanskrit, right, which is called Arya Manju Shristuti, right? So if you look at my thing, okay, it's called the sound isn't working, right? But like if you look at my thing, like Arya is yeah, and yeah, it's kind of like Arya, but if you look at Gong Huangcheng, it's a yeah, right? So even if you learn to like ignore the J, right, then you can't like make the difference between a real and a ya, which are very distinct in transcriptions from and to other languages, right? So like for Manjushri, right, then it's Manjushri, right? So the nzi, right, which is covered by my prenasalization hypothesis, right? It's a long vowel in Gong Huangcheng, right? So if you look at Miajushiri, right, yeah, it's still Manjushri, but you have to make a lot of more like mental calculations. Right, so in the same way, right, as someone called Namka Sengye, right, is a Namka Sengye, right, in my reconstruction. And if you look at the normal one, right, it's Nyamya Kya Siagi, right, so it's very hard, right, to especially given the resyllabification, right, in modern and late Tibetan from sen-ge to se-nge, right? So it's spelled in this right way in Tangut, but if you just use the older reconstructions, you don't get the kind of things, right? So for those, of course, we all read Chinese characters, right? So we can see, okay, so for example, this is the very famous 翻汉和师长中珠, right? The poem in the palm, which is like a quadrilingual, right, glossary. So the first column is Tangut language and Chinese script, then Tangut language and Tangut script, then Chinese language and Chinese script, and then Chinese language and Tangut script. Right. Then, of course, if you have something like a pai, right, in Tangut, it's a pai, and you just see, right, that it works well. But if it's pai, yeah, why is pai, it doesn't make any sense. Right. So like a 野兽, right, it's the Chinese word 野兽, right, is Tangut 野兽, right? This makes sense, but if it's like 野兽, yeah, maybe they are from Wenzhou or something, right? They don't speak like normal Mandarin or normal late Northwestern late Middle Chinese, right? So something that is much easier to demonstrate, right? The superiority of which is much easier to demonstrate in this kind of like, for every little detail, it just makes things click in your mind about Tangut data in a way that previous reconstructions don't, right? So please use my reconstruction if you want to work with Tangut, and if you don't, if you know a lot of languages, please take a look at my documentation for the transcription and give me a lot of like criticisms and rants. This reconstruction has like this little stroke below the vowel, right? So it's like ma, upper, right, normal vowel ma, then lower uberized vowel, so ma, no, de, me, vi, bu, le, bo, right, pu, pu, me, mo, right? So it's this kind of thing, which is kind of like RTI if you like speak Mongolian and these kind of languages, right? But it's uberization, which means that it's actually pronounced with a little r, a little r, like when you pronounce it, right? So this is the so-called uberization. Right, so now the native Tangut phonologists, right, describe their own language using the theoretical framework, right, from late Chinese 等韵学, which is basically the 韵图 stuff, right? So just like Chinese, right? So they have like 9 distinct classes, right? But like some initials are judged as like Chinese, right? So what I call sinoid, 类汉 initials, and some are they judge not like Chinese, right? So what I call 国音 or epichoric initials, right? So if things are epichoric, then usually it's not in the main part of the dictionary, and it's in a supplementary thing called miscellaneous categories, right? So yeah, it's not like Chinese, so it's not good, so it's miscellaneous, right? So that's how it works. Right, so we have 9, right? We have 9 classes. Right? The classes are very good, and it's very easy to tell which class a Tangut character belongs in, right? In the native dictionaries, right? So the classes are just the Chinese classes, right? So 重唇音、轻唇音, and 齿音, 然后那什么, right? Then the fourth one, what I call the cerebrals, right? Which is like what we are going to focus today. Then the molars, right? Since we have this uberization thing, says ge or ge or ge, and ng only, like and then right, sibilants. Then the post-alveolus, right? It's just like Chinese zhang zhuang, right? So it's like jia and zha, cha and cha, xia and sha, right? So they're very clear allophony, right? Conditioned by the uberization thing, right? So the gutturals, right? R and y are the same kind of gutturals, right? So, and then the 来日音, right? And you see that, right? So everything is from Northwestern Chinese, right? So like M and B are considered, Tangut M and B are considered like variants of each other, and like Z and Zhi are not considered sinoid but epichoric, right? Because they worked from the local Chinese, which have like ce and che for 从母 and传母. While native sources do not give us like enough information, right, for like what exact initial it is, right, within the class, but usually you can determine the class membership itself, right, very, very, very clearly, right? So, but for this one, for this class 4 thing that we're looking at, right, then everything is crystal clear, except that different sources often give different class assignments, right? So this is one of the things. So the classes, right, are the classes, you can see them mostly in the thing called the homophones, right, Hongyin. And so in homophones, the characters are just kind of randomly distributed, right? But in chapters named by the initial class, right? So we're looking at chapter 4, right, of the homophones, which is just called lhwa′tśhaw′ġhai, right, which is just called cerebrals, right? So we're looking at this chapter of the homophones. Right, so this is the first 4 characters, as you see, right? So you have this little circle, which is like the separator for like very nuanced little homophone groups, right? Then this is a huge homophone group. And so this one, right? So all these are different dictionaries using the Gong reconstruction, right? Because Gong is just a phonological system, right? So like different actual dictionaries give different actual reconstructions, right, assigned to the characters, right, for reasons. Right, so this one is very recent, and only the most recent dictionary has this, right? Because they managed to read the fanqie speller as n plus r, right? So n cars, it's nrar, right? But let's say I took a look at the thing and I just like see like 1/3 of the character, but yeah, it looks good, it's consistent, so why not? Then, right, different versions of the homophones, right, have different things. Then you have something that is zhong, right, what I reconstruct as zhong, right? So in the Pearl, right, in the 掌中注, it is transcribed in Chinese as niang, right, with the 娘母字 niang. Then in Tibetan is transcribed as mu, and the second character, which is mentioned in Tangut dictionaries as a common component in female names. And what is a common component in female names? That sounds like niang. Yeah, that's niang, right? It's just like 宋朝人不都叫什么什么大娘、二娘那是什么娘嘛，就感觉很像，对吧？ Right. Then you have this one is clearly from Chinese zhuang, right? But it's yeah, according to my principle, right? I just mechanically project the initial from the classification and the homophones, right? So this is zhang and zhang, right? But zhang is very clearly zhuang. So there's a reason why they reconstructed this as a zhou, right? Or zhang in my thing, right? So it's zhang. It's actually zhang, but I write in zhang because, yeah, because we respect the dictionary. Then right, this one is beautiful, right? So all the dictionaries write zhi, right? And here I write zhi. Then right, for this one, right, I still write zhi, right? But like different dictionaries, right? So the oldest 打印打字机打出来那个什么东西？typescript, right? The typewriter manuscript, the typescript of Gong Huangcheng, right? The old thing has G, and the new dictionary, which underwent a computerized procedure rather much like mine, right? So the new dictionary is rather good, right? Has also G, but the most common dictionary of 2008 gives me, right? So you have things like this, right? And we understand why it gives me, right? Because this transcribes the Chinese character ni, right? Which is a 娘母字, and which always, right, transcribes Sanskrit and Prakrit and right? So like Dharani, right? Holoni is Tongloni in Tangut, right? Then Bichoni or Pichuni is Pikoni or Pichaoni in the Tangut, right? So then, right, this is very complicated, right? But it's just that we don't know the actual reconstruction, right? But we kind of know it is like Nur, but since it's here, right? So I write Nur with a question mark. right? Then you have the d, right? So these were homophone groups, and these are like singleton characters in, right? So like in the Tongying and the homophones, right? Every chapter is organized into like groups of more than one character and groups of single characters, right? So these are the singletons, and that's right. So for example, here, right, this character is nzhe, and it's very clearly nzhe, right? But its 反切上字 is ni, right, with a normal n and not a retroflex n. And then we have zhang, right? This is transcribed in Chinese as niang, which probably was some kind of like neng, with some kind of like 二等两母的一个字，只是现在不大说。Right. Then we have zhang, muddy, not clean. Right. Then we have zhou, for which different dictionaries give to extinguish Chinese year or kitchen utensils. Right. So that is like the current state of Tangut lexicology. Right. So yeah, we see a character. Right. It could mean either of the three, but we don't know. One of them is probably correct. Right, so this one is dirty, but it is not the actual word, right? It's the actual word for dirty or turbid is 染, and you just say 染, right? In the kind of like 连面词. Then we have this ra again, right? There's a question mark because nobody knows how it's pronounced, right? But since it is here, right, I write a little dot under it. And then finally, Jing. This one is very weird, right? Because it's Mie plus Yin, right? So it should be Nim, not Jim, right? So the other version has Nim, and the most common, the most, let's say, authoritative version of the Tongying has Jing, right? So yeah, so I give all this because, right, we just have like this 20 characters, right? So just by looking at them without like, and even without like trying to understand too much, right, you get an idea about like how the native Tangut dictionaries are like and how things are like, blah, blah, blah. Right. So Nevsky, right? Nevsky thinks that this thing is fake, and so this is also right. This is also the solution, right? Adopted in the GHC reconstruction, right? Which is like the current de facto standard reconstruction, right? So Gong Huangcheng, he thought for quite a while that this represented a distinct palatal nasal. Right, but then he just thought, yeah, no, it's just either n or j. So Nishida Tatsuo thought it was a separate class and reconstructed four different initials, right? J. So you have like Jo, Ni, and Jong, right? For my Zhao, Ri, and Zhao, right? And then Arakawa Shintaro worked within basically for the initials worked within Nishida Tatsuo's tradition, but yeah, he did the correct-ish thing, which is that there is only one thing, which is Nye, right? But of course, since we all know Chinese, right? Then Niangmu is not Nye, it's not Nye, it's Zhe, right? The Zhi Che Cheng is right? Then the Jie thing is just like the one of the things I hate Cochrane the most, right? Because like since Cochrane introduced this very trivial error, right, into the mean pool, right, of Chinese historical phonology, right? Then a lot of people, when they don't think about it, right, then they got it wrong. But like, you know, like everyone knows it. Like there was some like random Japanese colonial administrator Ogawa Shogi, right, in Taiwan, right, who was like writing a dictionary of who was commissioned to write a dictionary of like Chinese languages in Taiwan, and right, so like it just kind of, you know, at this throwaway thing, right? In the preface, he wrote that yeah, zhizu is of course zhe because it corresponds to zhe in Sanskrit transcriptions, right? So like this is like one of Cochrane's least excusable errors, right? And we see why we should 继续这个批驳 Cochrane， 因为 because otherwise we still end up with a lot of like this thing, these kind of like echoes, right? In the things where they kind of think in the correct way. Right, so in the GHC style reconstructions, right? Because GHC is just like a phonology. an alphabet, not like not specifying the actual reconstruction of every character, right? So if you look at the things, of course, right, you have ne and zhe, and yeah, it's kind of weird that like they have a preference for writing ne if it's pingsheng and zhe if it's shangsheng, right? If it's tone 1 and tone 2, and I have no idea if they have seen something that I didn't see, right? So this is a possibility that there's something to that, right? But okay, but this is clearly wrong, right? Because first we have the evidence for independence, right? So if you just do like the current dictionaries using Gong and just merge the class 4 into normal N and normal J, right? That doesn't work because you have like Nji and there's Ni, and you have like Nj and there's both Ne and J, right? So there is, yeah, maybe you can concoct some very complicated theory that has to do with the tone, but we are very sure that, right, things don't actually work like this. So independence, and also, right, so since we don't actually know, right, how many initials are there, right, in each initial class, so from native lexicographical sources, we can always tell the initial class, right, but we can't, we don't have hard evidence for like how many initials there are, right? But for this thing, right, it's just like 20 characters, and if you just put them under the, for those for which the rhyme category is known, right? If you put them under the rhyme category, then you see that, okay, there's absence of internal distinction, and most probably it's just a one single initial. Yeah, maybe something tone 1, tone 2, but yeah, it's phonologically one single initial. So ambiguity with ne, right? As we have seen, right? So the character skirt, right? Is spelled with ni, with a normal n as the initial speller, right? At the 反切上字. Then in Rome, in the Tibetan, in the transcription in the Tibetan script, right? Rome is just written nyo, right? So a normal n is also written either as a normal n or as a ny in Tibetan, right? So like there's no difference. Then of course we also have ambiguity with zhe. Right, so first we have seen that some characters, right, so like zhang, tabit, right, is placed internally in the sea of characters as as if its initial has class 7, right, zhuang. Then the use of 反切 speller, right, so basically in zhi is very often used as a 反切 speller for words with real proven zhe, and especially in cases where there is the nasal pre-initial, right? So zhi kind of sounded like ji, and people thought that it was like good enough for writing like ji as zhi plus k, right? So for some words, we also think that it is actually zhe, right? But it's just that since it's a 反切上字 has zhe, right? So in the 文海, in the sea of characters, it's put in the position of zhe. I think this is just some kind of like internal editorial thing, and probably less important, right? But the result, of course, is that you get a very nice chain, right? Where on the chain, you just have two provenly different initials according to the consensus. Then, right, why not one in the middle, which explains a lot of things, right? So mi spells zhe, which spells ji, and ji spells j, right? So you have this very nice chain where things don't work as they should. So finally, we have evidence for a retroflex quality, right? So first, in the uvellarized context, real retroflex initials always introduce what I reconstruct as the ein medial, or maybe some kind of like like medial, right? The argent medial in Tangut. So right, so this is a very strong marker of retroflexity internally in the phonology of Tangut. And this also happens to zhe, right? So zhe patterns with a zhi, chi, shi, zhi, right? So this is a very strong, right? So even if we don't care about like what actually happens here, right? But this is a very strong marker, right, of it patterning with zhi, chi, shi. Then in the pearl, right, in the 掌中珠, it is transcribed always with niang initial, right? So zhang is niang and rong is niang. But also real zhi in Tangut is also transcribed with Middle Chinese niang, right? So like a jado is a fu tao. I don't know what is a fu tao, maybe some kind of like peach or something. And it's written 拿诺 so 手拿的拿，对吧？这是一个那个二等字，那两母拿。Ra, right? Nano. Then Bodhisattva, right? Zhangzi is written Na Jing, Zhangzi, Na Jing. Okay, so the synchronic conclusion is that there's good evidence for ne, nje, and nje, right? So it's some kind of like ne or nje or nje, ne, nje, nje, right? So for the spelling, right, it's easy to make a decision, right? Because it is written with n-like thing in Tibetan, right? So it's n-like, and since it writes Chinese Niangmu, which writes Sanskrit N, right? So like as a convention, of course, it's easy to make the convention that it should be written as N with a dot below, right? So this way, right, you see P Chauni and you think, maybe that means Bhikkhuni, right? So that's easy. And so concerning the actual value, right, so this is rather probably, right, related to the way Niangmu is pronounced in certain Jing dialects, right? So, so for example, if we manage...
文化里有一块特殊的生物，他们称是指示行家，到底是黑暗生物嘞？怎么这就可以理解？绕动词，绕的脑，绕皮皮，绕口令绕的东西，绕它与体这类字把土成长进来，把进长进来，揉二揉得揉二揉，揉揉开揉走，让揉手劲揉力，这过来这过的。
Right, he said zheng for a while, then nung for another time, right?
你的走揉这是匕首意思，啰嗦推说说，你把我你进口来，最后一块日这有日这。
Right, so if you want to see which Chinese dialects have this, right, the easiest character is nu, right, because it's like the word for like an adult woman is very often borrowed, right, but the word for daughter is like one of the most is one of the most least borrowable words, right? So like it always means daughter and not like girl or woman, right? So for daughter words, right, you have like zhou, then zhu, then ru, right, and these kind of things, and a lot of like more substrate things. Okay, so where does this come from? So there is only one cognate set, which is rather horrible, right? If you want to claim that it's like this, right? There's only one cognate set, except that it's rather good, right? So it's in rang, which means like turbid, dirty, right? Like the pus inside your body and these kind of things, right? This is very clearly Japuga Karandum, Zbog Karandum, then cross caps of Adum. And since these days we all think that Tangut is actually related to South Africa, right? Annual, right? Yeah, this works very well, but like there's only one example, and I know for people who do Old Chinese, right, a 孤正不立 is not that true because you're always discussing. I still have this very antiquated idea that 孤正不立, right? So we need further examples. Luckily, further examples do come, but like for another, right? For another initial, right? So for a hat, right? So hat is zhai, or to put on head, zhai, right? This word is connected to basically the Garong words for like both hat and to put as a hat, right? So it's the same collocation between like hat and wearing on when putting on one's head. Right? So here, zhe corresponds to rde, and again, right, this is a utilized context, right? So you have like hashe, right, stulu, right? This indicates that in an earlier thing, it must have been something like a something. Right? So with a utilized context. And finally, right, so to collect is zhang in Tangut, and this is rather probably just a japuk ardum, zbuk ardom, right? So like a circle, right? So like you put things in a circle, and it's kind of like you collect and assemble and gather, right? Right. So these cognates, right, make me feel much better than if we just have the turbid, right? Because now it's like a sanzhen, which can still kind of believe, but it's still better than the guzheng, right? So we have a rinde, which goes to Tangut nzhe, and a rde, which goes to Tangut zhi, right? So my preferred hypothesis is actually in metathesis, right? Because this way, rinde actually goes to ndr, right? Then ndr it's much easier to have like nzhe, kind of affricate-ish, right? Kind of you don't know if there is a d kind of like nzhe from ndr than if it happened like as a retroflexion and you end up with d, right? D doesn't change into like nzhe, right? But ndr can change very easily into nzhe, right? So that's why I like the metathesis more than the retroflexion. And of course, right, then why I am here, right? Because some people, at least, right? So no. So when I say that, of course, and Monsieur Sagat is going to hate me for this, right? But when I say that if we do this, maybe we can do this in Old Chinese, it's usually it's just something Guillaume-Jacques says, right? I think Guillaume-Jacques always say that there is too many in Old Chinese, and some must be right? I have no substantial thing to say about the actual Chinese, either in support or to oppose that. But for those who want to pursue this train of thought, right, then I think the Tangut example is a rather good example for a language where this happens, and it's most likely a metathesis, and either for metathesis or for the retroflexion, there's very good reason to consider that this happens only for rd, but not for g nor b, right? So this could explain why this doesn't jump out to your eye, like if you just work on normal, like Old Chinese to Middle Chinese thing, but I have no idea if this is good, right? It's just for to fit in the crowd. And so please check my Tangut reconstruction, and thanks for listening. And like this is not even like the most common thing in Tangut. In Tangut, the R usually puts the whole word in a retroflex, which is what when I write like R something R, right? It means that the whole word from the beginning to the end has a little rhotic quality, but it's a different thing from the retroflex. It is a different thing from the true retroflexes, right? So there's something like this, but like the R does a lot of different things. The R does this thing and also the retroflexion are all distinct, and they are all connected to R. Also.
Let's just pursue this a tiny bit more. So, like, I mean, this has been known for a long time, like maybe Nishida or something, that R in Sino-Tibetan languages corresponds to some kind of phonation type in Tangut.
Right, that's the syllable-wide retroflexion.
Yeah, so that's something like, Proto-Tangut rpa becomes
right. Yeah, what I write as RPAR.
RPAR, yeah. Right. So does that not happen before dentals?
That's is that a good question? I think this indeed happens, I think, much less before real dentals, right? But I think here I cannot rule out, because all the examples discussed here have a very strong uvularization context introduced by
uvularization together.
Right. So this thing is mostly like current like Proto-Garonic or Proto-Sino-Tibetan Qerenda becoming ja and Qerda becoming ja. And if this Qer that didn't exist, whether or not this happens, I don't know for sure, right? But I think like there's basically, if you actually like want to do Tangut like in a proper way, then it is still not done, not even after like Guillaume Jacques' good book and all this decade by mine, and still I think you can't elucidate the actual condition for when or not a lot of things happen.
Okay.
Thank you very much.